ADHD is often very much misunderstood by neurotypical people and even by some ADHDers. I, for one, used to believe my ADHD was really mild before I read up on it and realized my ADHD is actually a really big part of my life. Even the DSM-5 misunderstands it, mostly because we have more recent research. I could go off on the changes to that section I think the DSM-6 needs to make, but that's a topic for a different day. Most people, though, get their understanding of ADHD from societal stereotypes rather than from research or ADHDer experiences. People tend to think of ADHDers as rowdy troublemakers with visibly really short attention spans, which is a problematic stereotype. There are many traits of ADHD, both positive and negative, that neurotypicals might not consider that we may have. I've compiled a list of things that go on in my head due to my ADHD that people wouldn't necessarily expect. Disclaimer: this is just my experience and will not reflect the experience of everyone with ADHD, as we are all different. These are specifically things that are less talked about in ADHD literature. This also will obviously not be a comprehensive list of ADHD traits, just some that came to mind when thinking about ADHD traits. For context, I have combined presentation ADHD, which means I have both attention difficulties and hyperactive, impulsive symptoms. Number 1. Social difficulties. This is a problem many ADHDers have but isn't talked about much. We can have a hard time noticing social cues due to inattention. We can accidentally take over a conversation by talking about an interest and losing track of the other people we are talking to. We can get overwhelmed by the amount of people contributing to a conversation, since this can mess up focus. This is one of the reasons why ADHD can look similar to autism, since ADHDers can also have difficulty with social skills due to our neurodivergence. The problem is that people are a lot less understanding of social differences when you tell them you have ADHD than when you say you're autistic. People don't associate ADHD with these struggles, which is very problematic. Another social difficulty that I and other ADHDers have is having trouble focusing on a conversation. I will often space out or not be able to keep track of a conversation or, especially, not be able to focus on a monologue. Different things can affect how much I can focus, such as time of day and how tired I am. I tend to handle this by doing what I call attention weaving. This is when I bring my focus back to what I'm listening to after each time I get distracted. My attention ends up weaving in and out of the conversation. Each time I focus back on it, I'm often able to use context clues to fill in the gaps. I am gifted, which probably helps me be able to use this to take in what I need from the conversation. Other people, though, can have more trouble with missing parts of conversations than I do. This is something people should understand, that you might have to repeat things for us if we spaced out, and that doesn't mean we don't care about what you are talking about. Number 2. Memory. You may have heard people mention that spacing out is a low level of dissociation, which is when your mind and emotions disconnect from your body or surroundings. For me, if I'm in a low focus state, I can just walk around genuinely not noticing my surroundings since I'm thinking about something that my brain is finding interesting. My brain will still make sure I'm doing all the things I need to be doing, like following someone around or saying prayers, but I won't notice I'm doing them. It also makes it that people won't notice I'm distracted. This is something that I think everyone experiences, but people with ADHD tend to spend more time spaced out than neurotypicals. One of the things that dissociation, including at low levels, is associated with is holes in memory. Your brain requires attention to form a memory, so if your attention is elsewhere, you won't create a memory of something, even if your eyes or ears took it in. A good example I heard once is, someone introduces themselves to you and you're thinking about something like what they're wearing instead of paying attention to what they're saying. You aren't going to remember what their name is, even though you heard it, because your brain didn't have the attention on it necessary to create the memory of them introducing themselves. Again, as most things about ADHD, this is something everyone experiences sometimes, but ADHDers often experience it more frequently, and often, as in my case, it will actually create a recurring problem. 3. Emotional dysregulation. This one actually has a good deal of research on it, but it isn't in the ADHD criteria and isn't something most people think about when it comes to ADHD. Many ADHDers tend to have bigger feelings than neurotypicals. We will have higher emotional peaks and lower canyons. One of the traits this can lead to is rejection sensitivity, getting upset easily when we feel that someone is rejecting us. We can also struggle with frustration tolerance. For me, if I feel like I have hit a dead end in something I am trying to do, I will just go into my shutdown mode and give up on the thing I was working on. Being prone to emotional dysregulation, especially if we have the emotion-based decision-making that comes with the hyperactive, impulsive presentation, can make ADHDers prone to mental health struggles. At times when my mood has been low and I've become more reactive, especially during depressive episodes, I have engaged in self-damaging behaviors in attempt to relieve my emotional pain. Unfortunately, this isn't an experience unique to me. About a third of people with ADHD will also develop depression, which often worsens our emotional dysregulation. ADHD is considered a risk factor for self-damaging coping mechanisms and even for death by suicide. On a lighter note, I'll describe what my brain is like on the inside. Number 4. Attention span. Unlike the stereotype, I don't usually get distracted visibly. Obviously, my inattention can make it difficult to focus on something I'm listening to or looking at. If I don't have something external to focus on, though, my ability to focus on a single train of thought is even more limited. If I am thinking into the air about something, I will usually get distracted within a minute. It can make brainstorming or trying to think through a personal situation difficult, because I have to keep drawing my attention back to the topic. It can be annoying, but it isn't as problematic for me as you might think, since I'm adapted to it. I'm used to having to drag my focus back, and I talk to myself out loud sometimes to ground my focus. Since this is how I've always been, I only realized recently that other people have much longer attention spans. 5. Internal hyperactivity. I am always thinking, and when I say always, it isn't an exaggeration. Unless I'm extremely exhausted, I will rarely have a moment where my brain is quiet if I'm not focused on something external. Even when I am, if the focus of my attention doesn't require all my brain's attention capacity, I will still be thinking about other things. My mind does something I call brain hopscotch. I will be thinking about something, and some detail will remind me of another thought, and I'll go on a tangent. Then it'll make me think of something else, and I'll go on a tangent from that tangent, and it'll keep happening. I end up thinking about something totally unrelated to my original focus, but they'll be connected through a series of hops my brain did. If I feel like I need to focus, I will at some point notice I got distracted and pull my attention back to the original thought. I do try to have some time in my day, though, where I can just let my mind go where it wants. My brain's constant activity can be nice when I'm bored, because I'm never without my brain stimulation. However, sometimes I'll get sick of my brain or will find it jumping back repeatedly to something I don't want to think about. Number 6. Hyperfocus. This is something that many ADHDers often experience and has a decent amount of research about it, but the DSM doesn't mention it at all in its entry for ADHD. Despite the name, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder, which in my opinion needs to be changed, ADHDers don't have a lack of attention, we have an inability to regulate our attention. As a result, we can get distracted where NTs, neurotypicals, won't. But we can also hyperfocus on something when a neurotypical brain would have a, quote, normal level of focus. This is often talked about as an ADHD superpower, but it can also have negative effects, not just positive ones. I can get hyper-focused on something that is pretty inconsequential when I really need to be doing something else with my time. I will often not notice the time until it's hours past when I wanted to be in bed. On the flip side, though, I will be really productive if I hyperfocus on something I actually want or need to get done. Like NT's experience in flow state, the world drops away and you literally notice nothing other than what you are doing. It can be a wonderful feeling, especially when you snap out of hyperfocus and see how much you've written. It also gives me a break from having to think and might honestly be how I don't get fed up with my brain's constant chatter. 7. Special interests. The term special interest is used in autism and isn't used in ADHD research. However, many ADHDers relate very strongly to it and may use the term to describe our hyperfixations. Special interests, according to the DSM-5 autism criteria, are highly restricted, fixated interests that are abnormal in intensity. These are often characterized by consistent hyperfocus on a subject, getting extremely excited about it and thinking about it often, and difficulty in talking about anything else. ADHDers will often have a hyperfixation for a short period of time on a subject or even person when we first encounter them. An example from my life is when I first learned about polar graphing in pre-calculus. I spent about a week afterward feeling like I had to tell everyone how cool it was and playing with polar graph art on my calculator and on Desmos. Sometimes a hyperfixation will stick, though. I have a special interest in the band 21 Pilots. I have consumed many hours of content about this band, am active on social media communities about it, have most songs memorized, including unofficial ones, and have written several theories about 21 Pilots lore. I regularly feel the need to drop a 21 Pilots song lyric into everyday conversation. I once spent at least a half hour tracking the camera rotations in a video the band put on their social media. I care that much about it. And this is an interest I've had for a year now. The attention I put to my interests is pulled from other places. I have many things I don't care about at all and don't put any of my attention to. Fashion is a good example. I could not care less about fashion or how others perceive the way I dress, as long as it's respectable, and I will rarely notice what clothes someone is wearing. I care about people, so I try to ask them about their life and interests. But many times I really amn't interested in it, and I feel bad about that. Some people I find talk about things that I find more interesting, which often makes me platonically attracted to them, and I try to befriend them. They're also people who tend to be okay with or even enjoy me talking about my special interests. ADHD and autism have a significant amount of overlap and they can be hard to differentiate. Autism and ADHD, also known as ODHD, is also a common comorbidity, a common set of disorders for one to have simultaneously. There is also a suggested link between the two disorders through something called monotropism, but that is a subject for a different video. I was recently tested for autism, and apparently I'm allistic, not autistic, but my ADHD creates traits that look like autism. To be honest, I still haven't fully accepted my ADHD, even close to 9 years after being diagnosed, and I haven't yet gotten over the result of my autism evaluation. That's part of why I'm making this video. My ADHD has had a lot of negative impact on my life and my self-esteem, and I'm still trying to accept it. If you actually watched this entire video, thank you. I realize this probably isn't engaging for many people, an AI voice reading an essay on psychology. But I'm really passionate about this subject and I want people to understand ADHD better.